Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 7th ELA curriculum overview. So we are going to first give you our class breakdown. So out of the 88 minutes of our class period, students are going to have 20 minutes of PLT, which is their personal learning time. So this is designed for kids to work on the skills that is just personalized to them on their own. They could work in small group, or they might be called up by the teacher to work with the teacher. During this time, students are going to be working on Achieve 3000, IXL, and any missing work that they might have. Students will receive whole group instruction for at least 20 minutes of class after the PLT time. So this is where students will go over their objectives for the day, and they will have a mini lesson on the skill that they're going to be learning for that day. And then the rest of the time is work time in ELA, so students will have the rest of class to work on any content that is assigned to them for that day. So during that time, they could either be working independently in small group or with a teacher as well, depending on what the assignment calls for. Our expectations is that kids come in with a charged iPad, that they have wired headphones, a personal reading book. This could be from home or from our library. They have a pen or a pencil and a notebook. We do the majority of our work on an app that is called ClassKick. Teachers can see students work real time and make comments and suggestions on their work. So if you ever want to check on your students' work, you could go ask them to open up their ClassKicks, and you could kind of see our comments and their work that is taking place. So when it comes to homework, the only homework that students will have is if they just do not finish something in class that is on ClassKick or their Achieve articles. It's going to be done for homework then. So we don't just give homework at the end of class. It's just whatever they do not finish. So our activities, so just like in 6th grade, students will continue to do Achieve 3000. So that helps their reading stamina and comprehension. They'll have 2 lessons every week that they will have to complete by the end of the week on Sunday. And then grades will be given for each lesson, and they will be updated in Schoology weekly. So you could check in on how well they're doing. And it kind of gives us a grade level that they are reading at as well. And it helps us to know what they need to be working on. We also do IXL for ELA. So this is a program that helps our students with phonics, reading comprehension, and writing strategies. Students will work on this program during the first 20 minutes of class during their personal learning time. So right now we are just getting into quarter 1. We just started reading our fictional book, A Long Walk to Water, that works on reading comprehension and literature skills. We're reading it as a class. And then after the reading, we are going to be doing nonfiction writing. So each week we focus on a new skill. For fiction writing, we will be focusing on a new skill that they can do that comes with writing in detail, writing with dialogue, and editing. Our quarter 2, we get into reading nonfiction text. So students will be reading nonfiction articles about technology and how it affects the teenage brain. They're going to work on comprehension with this and citing quotes. And then they're going to write their argumentative paper. So they will write it based on the research that they have done. And they will, the argument that they're going to say is, does technology hurt or benefit the teenage brain? And this will allow them to apply their reading skills into their argumentative paper. Quarter 3, we focus on reading memoirs, fiction, and nonfiction. So students will be in book clubs this quarter, and they will have the option to choose from books of I Am Malala, A Long Way Gone, Absolute True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, and Red Scarf Girl. They are going to be writing about whatever book club book that they have chosen, that culture. And it will be based on the information from their book and research that they have done as well. In quarter 4, we end off the year with reading poetry. So they'll be reading various types of poetry in order to understand the structure, content, and language. And then they will also be writing poetry. So students will then write their own poetry based on the work they have read at the beginning. We also have AIMS ELA, which is a accelerated ELA class that you, some of your students might be in. So for reading, they do a lot of short stories. They read The Giver. They're going to be reading Of Mice and Men, nonfiction articles, argument texts. They do literature circles with memoirs, poetry, and they'll be reading Bronx Masquerade. For writing, they're going to be writing narratives with multiple perspectives. They are going to do some informational writing. They're going to write an argumentative paper. They do weekly blogging, and they will be writing poetry. We also have dual ELA in 7th grade. So for dual, it is the same class for social studies and language arts. So social studies is taught 100% in Spanish. Language arts is 50% English and 50% Spanish. Language arts starts with 45 minutes of Spanish reading, and then it ends with 45 minutes of English writing. We will switch to Spanish writing and English reading next quarter, so they will flip-flop. And then the content that they are teaching is going to be the same as 7th grade ELA, like I have described in the beginning. It is just going to be with the 2 languages. Thank you so much for listening to our curriculum overview. If you have any questions, please come and meet the ELA staff for 7th grade on curriculum night, 9/22 from 6 to 7:30. And then be sure to check your email for any other future updates.
This is a 7th grade math curriculum for Heritage Middle School. Our classroom expectations and overview. In this class, we do math together, share our understandings, connect and reflect on our practice, leave no one behind, and believe that everyone is a math person. The online platforms that are used in math class are ClassKick, which is accessed through an app, student.desmos.com, where students sign in with their Google password. That's the main hub of our math curriculum. iExcel, which is used for practice during PLT time and for skill development. And finally, Map Accelerator, which provides students with videos and extra practice on skills at their own skill level based on their MAP test scores. What to expect in each unit. Students will work on individualized skills during PLT time. This will be 20 minutes a day where students work on iExcel or Map Accelerator. Teachers will also be pulling small groups during this time. Students will also receive homework to complete from iExcel and other resources as assigned. Here are our unit breakdowns. Unit 1 is about scale drawings. Students will identify scale copies, find and use a scale factor, and interpret scale on maps and diagrams. This addresses Geometry Standards 1 and 6. Unit 2 is about introducing proportional relationships, determining when relationships are proportional, calculating constants of proportionality from a table, graph, equation, or written scenario, using equations to represent proportional relationships. This addresses our standards RP2 A through C. Unit 3 is all about circles. The students will calculate radius and diameter given constraints, develop formulas for circumference and area, and calculate area and circumference given certain constraints. This addresses Geometry Standard 4. Unit 4 is all about proportional relationships and percentages. So students will continue to calculate the constant of proportionality, equivalent rates and ratios, and find a scale factor. They'll divide with fractions to generate scale and unit rate, find percent increase and decrease, calculate tax, tip, markup, markdown, and commissions. This addresses standards RP1 and 3 and NS2D. Unit 5 is all about rational number arithmetic. Students will add, subtract, multiply, and divide with positive and negative whole numbers, decimals, and fractions, and they'll solve written problems and equations using all 4 operations involving fractions, decimals, and whole numbers. This addresses NS1, NS2, NS3, and EE3. In Unit 6, we start our journey in algebra with expressions, equations, and inequalities. Students represent scenarios using tape diagrams and equations. They know the similarities and differences between 2 forms of equations given here. They solve equations in both forms, and they write and solve inequalities. This addresses our expression and equation standards 1, 2, and 4. In Unit 7, we learn all about angles, triangles, and prisms. We identify when one, multiple, or no triangles can be formed given constraints. We use angle relationships to solve for missing angles. We describe and predict cross-sections of 3D objects, and we develop and use volume and surface area formulas. This addresses our geometry standards 2, 3, 5, and 6. In Unit 8, we talk about probability and sampling. We understand and use a variety of terms associated with probability, sampling, populations, and outcomes. We estimate probabilities. We represent sample space in tables, tree diagrams, and lists. We generate samples and describe strengths and weaknesses of different sampling methods. This addresses our SP standards 1 through 8. Here is our year at a glance. We have our 8 content units on the right-hand side. We have our 5 standard categories on the left-hand side. Those are ratios and proportions, number sense, expressions and equations, geometry, statistics, and probability. We look forward to chatting with you more about our curriculum here at Heritage Middle School at our curriculum night. Please feel free to ask your child's teacher any questions you may have about what they're learning, and we'll be happy to address them then.
This presentation will go over Ames Math. 7th grade Ames will look at a combination of 7th and 8th grade material. In September, we look at proportional relationships and measuring circles. October is proportional relationships and percentages, and operations with positive and negative numbers. November is looking at probability and sampling. December is looking at rigid transformations and congruence, and angles, triangles, and prisms. In January, 7th grade will look at scale drawings and dilation, similarity, and introducing slope. February will cover expressions, equations, and inequalities, and operations with positive and negative numbers. March will look at linear equations and systems, and proportional relationships and slope. April looks at function and volume, and May will cover associations with data.
What should the kids bring to class each day? Their 3-ring binder, which is where they keep their notes, something to write with, and always their iPad and headphones. Simple expectations each day. Bring all your materials, follow all the procedures, focus, and participate in the lesson. What is a typical lesson? There's some period of instruction, then the kids get some tasks to show their learning or understanding, and then they have a check-in with the teacher to see how they're doing. We do not give a lot of homework. It is usually something to have them prepare for assessments. If they don't do their homework, they get working lunch for the following week. Right? The 7th grade curriculum, it's a lot of civics and government, a little history, a little geography, a little economics. Here is the flow of units. We start out with a lot of civics and government. Current unit now is this forms of government. They learn about monarchies, dictatorships, democracies, theocracies, and some other types of government. We then move into a little bit of history. How did our country wind up having a republic form of government? We look at some causes that led to that. We then move into more civics and government. What are America's founding documents? And what do they say and do? So we'll look at the Declaration of Independence, see what that says, what are the big ideas, and same with the Constitution. The Constitution is the big kahuna in 7th grade. It is broken into 3 sections and therefore 3 subtests. We start out with a look at the Bill of Rights, and that's assessed in around mid-November. We move to a look at the preamble, which explains the goals of the Constitution, mid-December assessment for that. And then the larger section is about the branches and powers and checks and balances. That's assessed in early February. So the Constitution test is what I'd say cumulative. So it's 3 tests in one, but it's broken apart into 3 separate tests. So let's say the Bill of Rights test is about 25 questions, the preamble test is about 25 questions, the branches test is maybe 50 questions. These are not final numbers yet. We wind up with a total of 100 questions over the course of all 3 tests. To pass the overall Constitution test, you have to get X correct out of 100. We're still working on that. Passing the test is not a graduation or promotion requirement, but it is a Berwyn tradition, and we do hope everyone does it. There's a lot of content in this unit. I give a survey like this each year at the end of the year. Which social studies unit do you think you learned the most in this year? Each year it's the same, the Constitution. And which social studies unit do you think was the most difficult to learn or understand? It's always the Constitution. So it's a lot of learning, but most kids do fine. We then move to a little bit of history because it will be February. So a little Black history. What challenges have Black Americans faced and overcome? We start out with a little quick look at slavery, go all the way up to the Great Migration, and then analyze some data to draw some conclusions. We move to a brief economics unit. It's about supply and demand, how they affect the price of goods. Kids do a little buying and selling simulation that they've enjoyed. Move on to a bit of geography. How do you analyze and represent cultural and environmental characteristics? An easier way to say that is, can you understand this map or this graph? And so they do a lot of analyzing of different graphs and maps to figure out what they mean. As the fourth quarter comes along, we go back to history, a little look at causes and effects of Western expansion, then a unit on Native Americans, specifically focused on the government policies that we've had toward them and how they were affected. So we'll start out with the early policies all the way up to today's situations, and the students will also analyze some data.
This will walk you through the 7th grade science curriculum for Heritage Middle School. Here's some classroom expectations. In science, students will need the following supplies brought with them every day to class. A composition notebook. This will serve as their lab notebook. This is where we put all of our notes, all of our written materials, all of our group work, our data from our hands-on experiments, and it's also where students draw diagrams as we learn about awesome science stuff. That composition notebook will stay in the classroom so that students do not need to transport it to and from class each time. They also need a folder so that they can put any papers that are handed to them in a safe place for keeping. This could be an accordion folder or a loose single folder, it doesn't matter. They also need their iPad, obviously fully charged every day, and a pen or pencil. Behavior expectations in science class align with the school-wide PBIS expectations. In general, students are expected to be responsible, respectful, and safe, to take responsibility for their own learning and not distract other students from being able to learn as well. And there is a big emphasis in science class on lab safety, which would be especially important during our chemistry unit. During our chemistry unit, we do use some pretty serious chemicals. Students are taught the appropriate way to use safety goggles and other lab safety equipment, as well as the appropriate way to interact and handle these types of materials. We use standard lab safety grade beakers and glassware, and students are expected to handle this stuff with maturity and to make sure that any accident is reported to the teacher immediately. Homework expectations. Usually student homework will be assignments that they begin in class but just do not complete. I find that students completing solo standalone assignments often go home and they are without me there to help them, and it can be difficult or impossible sometimes for students to complete those assignments. So 99% of the time, if students are working on something at home, you can be sure that they began that assignment at school and that it's just a continuation of what they already have been instructed and helped with. Obviously, studying for assessments is a big deal. Our curriculum is based in a program called Amplify, and the assessments are created by Amplify, so those assessments can be pretty challenging. I work with students all the time that are preparing for retakes or reassessments for those tests because they can be a challenge. So I would encourage students to study many days ahead and not wait until the night before the test. Also, extra help is always available. I'm always telling students they can ask me to come in early, they can stay late after school, or ask to come up during lunch to my room, and they can get extra help whenever they need it. Here's our year at a glance for 7th grade science. We do use, like I said, the Amplify Science curriculum. This is a district-purchased curriculum from the companies called Amplify Science. All the D100 middle schools, Heritage and Freedom, use the same curriculum, and so this is a standard curriculum for 7th graders attending District 100 schools. We start with Earth and Space Science. This includes geology and basic earth science, and then we get into plate motion. This is where we introduce the students to the concept that Earth's surface has changed over time and we learn about how it's changed over time. Then we learn more specifically about the rock cycle and how rocks transform from one type to another, and how new rock is created, and also how rock is destroyed through erosion and weathering and things like that. When we start our chemistry unit, we start with thermal energy. This teaches the students the concepts of atoms moving around faster when they're heated up, and atoms moving around slower when they're cooled down. Then we learn about phase changes from solids to liquids and gases, and how that kind of relates back to thermal energy. And then we finish off kind of like the crown jewels of our 7th grade science curriculum is our chemistry unit. Our chemistry chemical reactions labs. Last year we did about 8 of them. I hope to do even more this year. Those are full class period long labs that are hands-on. They use legitimate chemicals that are purchased from science supply companies, and the kids really have a lot of fun and learn a ton by getting hands-on in the chemistry lab. And life science is how we finish up the school year. This is the first time some of our students have been introduced to basic biology concepts, and the two that we're going to hit really are population resources and matter and energy in the ecosystem, mainly how energy flows throughout the ecosystem. So that's kind of our year at a glance. Thanks very much.
Physical education expectations and overview. The PE curriculum that students will participate in include fitness activities, team sports, individual and dual activities, and team building. PE standards: participation in fitness activities with maximum effort, participation in movement skills to the best of your ability, showing positive sportsmanship. The objective of the PE program is to increase student growth and development by guiding them into becoming healthy lifelong learners through a common curriculum. This incorporates physical, mental, emotional, and social health within the physical education setting.
Health expectations and overview. The health programs from McGraw-Hill engage students in exploration of health and wellness. Hands-on activities and real-world applications of health skills provide the students with the understanding they need to create a personal plan for a healthy life. Health content: nutrition, tobacco, drugs, and alcohol. Our guest speakers will be from Sarah's Inn to talk about healthy dating and relationships. Corazon will also come in to talk about sex education and human development. A permission slip will be required.
In 7th grade music, we have the goal to develop a musical style and taste by listening to a variety of music genres. We'll review the fundamentals of music that we learned in 6th grade, including rhythms and pitches. We'll compose melodies and harmonies, adding on that second layer of harmonies. And we'll learn song form for both pop music and classical music with examples from our students. Some examples of our standards are to identify music notation, compose rhythmic and melodic phrases, and identify reasons for selecting music based on musical characteristics, interest, or purpose. The 4 criteria for our standards in music class are creating, performing, connecting, and responding.
These are the basic expectations and overview of 7th grade art. During this time period, students build on the foundational concepts that we covered in 6th grade art, the elements of art, and continue moving on to the principles of art or design. Some examples on the next slide would be those of either a Pokemon cartooning project or a Toy Still Life. This quarter, we started with a shading and value project where they were able to pick any kind of item and draw over it, and we worked on value scales. We will be doing some kind of technical drawing. Generally, we do 1-point perspective or isometric drawing. And then we try to do at least one painting project. Generally, we work in tempera for that. Every day, students should bring their pencil and iPad. Occasionally, they are asked to bring in other supplies, but I always give them a heads up way in advance before that happens. I ask that they're ready to learn and be challenged by new concepts and skills, and that they would just give their best effort. And eventually, we have 4 final projects that are generally done or due, every quarter. Thank you.
Seventh grade Spanish is a 1-quarter course in which students will begin learning the basics of speaking, listening, reading, and writing in Spanish. And students will focus on Spanish vocabulary, grammar, and they'll begin conjugating verbs. And the standard for this class is to engage in conversations, understand written language, and present on a variety of topics.
In 7th grade social justice, we will work to become more aware of the problems that face our world so we can develop solutions. This year, students will take social justice to a new level. They will work with their classmates to develop an action project. They will need to work together to understand problems, recognize their own power to create change, and develop their plan of action. We are stronger when we work together, and this year, students will see the incredible outcome of their collective effort.
7th grade band is a pull-out class where students are borrowed from their exploratory class once a week for 45 minutes. They build upon their beginning band skills that they learned when they first started in 6th grade. They are continuing to learn, read, recognize, and perform music on their instruments at a higher level, and they also are gaining an appreciation for instrumental music. The standards covered are identifying music notation, performing various pieces of music, and evaluating performances by oneself and others. A great way you can help your student at home is by encouraging them to practice at least 20 minutes a day.
STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, art, and math. The main goal in STEAM is to promote problem-solving skills that apply to the real world by collaborating with their peers. Students will focus on the next generation science standards for engineering and design. In 7th grade STEAM, students will participate in the Energy and Environment Project Lead the Way program. Students will learn about energy and create prototypes for alternative energy.